Today's guest is Holly Barkwell, an experienced public safety practitioner with over 25 years of technical and operational experience in 911 emergency communications and dispatch. Holly works with fire, police, and EMS agencies to navigate technical, operational, and organizational change. She provides support on public safety, policy, governance, technology, and standards and best practices. She participates on multiple standards and technical development committees for various associations. Holly serves as a member of the board of directors for the National Emergency Number Association, which is an international public safety association, and she is an active participant in the Canadian Emergency Services Working Group, a dedicated national group of public safety professionals developing a plan to transition Canada to a digital infrastructure by March 2025. She has worked with federal, provincial, and local governments across Canada, the U.S., and overseas. Holly is the president and CEO of Barkwell Holland Group Incorporated, a successful Canadian 911 and emergency communications specialist firm. BH Group Inc. provides professional and technical services to public safety agencies, local, regional, and territorial governments, and associated industry partners. We are honored to have her as our guest. I wanted to thank Enbridge Gas for once again sponsoring today's program and allowing us the opportunity to bring these informative speaker series into your homes. Without further ado, back to you, Jonathan.
Thank you, Michael. Please welcome our guest today, Ms. Holly Barkwell. Holly, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jonathan.
So your industry intrigues me. The whole cybersecurity, the whole technology thing is mind-boggling for me. I did manage to set the clock on my VCR just the other day, so I'm catching up. But you are involved in the 911 transition from analog to digital. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And I don't really know what that means. Before we get into that, I wanted to just a little bit of background about you. How did you get into this business?
Well, actually, quite by accident. My background is IT and software development, and believe it or not, I started in mining way back in the day. But in '94, I was downsized and looking for work, so I found a job with a small software company that did emergency dispatch software for fire, police, and ambulance departments.
Okay, this was before we had the 911, or
this is before VCRs, yeah.
Thanks for that.
So no, this was after 911 was implemented for some time, but I was hooked, and I've been in the industry ever since.
Okay. When you say you were in mining, you were actually in mining, with a pickaxe in the mine?
Well, so I started in instrumentation. I actually worked underground for 2
Whereabouts?
years in Timmins. I'm from Timmins. Yes.
Oh, are you? Okay.
Yeah. So it used to be called Kid Creek, then it was Falconbridge.
Right.
Now I'm not sure who
something
owns
else.
it. It's American Barrack or something, I think now.
So you made the move from Timmins to Toronto.
I did.
Big smoke.
Big smoke.
Wow.
Yes.
Was that because of your job?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. There was no work at the time. It was in the 90s, the recession, everything hit. So it was basically wherever their work was where we were going. So we ended up in Uxbridge, and and been here in the area ever since. So
good. Good. Obviously you like it. It's good.
Yeah.
So the job that you had, the software for emergency response, I don't know a lot about that. I know somebody talks on a microphone and somebody gets on a truck and then somebody puts out the fire. And I know there's a lot more to it than that. But what exactly did your company do?
So we provided the software. So when a call comes in, there are a whole bunch of things that have to happen in order for the right people to show up at the right spot at the right time with the right equipment. So the computer systems that we delivered would help the dispatchers collect information from the caller, determine the best response or the most appropriate response to send, and then determine what the vehicles needed to be, who needed to be on the vehicles, and the best way to route them to get there the fastest. So
it's a lengthy process.
It is.
Because I'm sure the people who are calling are panicking because they've got, the world's coming to their end sort of thing.
Yes.
So then the dispatcher has to analyze the call, find out where it is, right?
Correct.
decide whether to send a fire truck or 2 fire trucks or an ambulance or whatever the case,
Yes.
and where to send them.
Correct.
Wow. So, and that was before they had a lot of technology available, right?
Well, we had the computer systems, but
Right.
they weren't as sophisticated.
But GPS and that wouldn't have existed
No.
for the average person, right?
Well, we had a precursor called AVL, which is automatic vehicle location technology, but
Okay.
it was more like the GPS systems in your car. It was a transponder that would relay location information, but it was a lot more antiquated, let's put it that way, than it is today.
And then where was the next step after you finished that stint?
So when I finished there, I went to work with a company in St. Catharines that developed software to deliver fire alarm information from commercial systems directly into fire departments.
So if the fire alarm goes off in the building,
Right.
it automatically rings. It doesn't just make a lot of noise. It actually goes somewhere.
It would go directly to the fire department, which studies showed could save upwards of 5 minutes.
Right, which is crucial.
It's crucial because fires grow exponentially. So the longer it grows, the longer it takes, the faster it grows. The bigger the fire gets, the more danger to citizens and to responders to get there.
And what exactly was your role in that? Just to keep the software up and running, or to enhance it? Or?
Well, initially developing the software, getting it installed and running, and then maintaining it.
And this was in this area, in the Toronto area.
Correct.
Okay. And were they all linked? All the fire departments were linked. So if I call, do I get do they know where I'm calling from? Will they send me back then? Would they send me a fire truck from my area?
Yes.
But if I lived somewhere else, they could also access a different fire department as such.
So the 911 system as it exists today has been the same pretty much since implementation.
Which was when?
In Winnipeg, it was in 1957 was the first implementation of 3-digit dialing. Okay. Ontario adopted it in 72 or 73,
wow, that's quite a stretch.
as we know it, 911. Yeah. So what happens when you pick up the phone to dial 911, it used to be on an analog line, it was attached to an address. So Bell Canada or whoever installed that phone knew what the address was. Right. So when you picked it up, that address would go determine which PSAP in the province the call would be routed to.
Okay.
And that would be the closest one for that serving area. And then they would answer the call and ask you a bunch of questions and then dispatch fire, police, or ambulance, whichever one was the closest to you.
Okay.
And that's essentially the same way it works today. But the systems that work on the public safety side, or what we call the PSAP, the public safety answering point, those systems are much more sophisticated than they were. So over 20 years, they've evolved somewhat. But the system itself, from the telecommunications side, has remained essentially unchanged in almost 50 years.
Wow. That's hard to believe with all the technology changes that have taken place. I imagine it's got quite a price tag attached to it as well, right?
It does. A question I get asked all the time is how come Uber can find me and Pizza, but public safety struggles to find me? Well, that's a very easy answer because Uber and Pizza have millions of dollars to throw at R&D. Public safety is a government public service. They do not have the budget.
Yeah, no, it's fair. It's a fair comment. And yet, it's probably one of the most important things going.
Absolutely.
So is 911 a national thing? Or I know it's governed by the CRTC, but is it like one big organization?
So it's not an organization as in, and there is an owner for it. 911 is a public service.
Okay.
So across Canada, we have an entity called Public Safety Canada, but it doesn't actually govern 911. So provinces each own public safety, which means that most municipalities govern their own delivery of essential services, so fire, police, and EMS. So the funding flows in a similar format. So the CRTC regulates the carriers, which provide the 911 telecommunications infrastructure, but municipalities actually provide the service.
Okay. So that's why Manitoba did it in the 50s and Ontario in the 70s.
Correct.
Okay. So are they all at the same level of service, of quality? Because the CRTC sort of regulates that, or would Ontario be light years ahead of Newfoundland, for example, or...
We would like it to be a ubiquitous system, but it unfortunately is not.
It's not.
Some provinces have enacted legislation that allows municipalities to collect a levy called a 911 service fee on your phone bill. Those funds are collected by the telecommunications carrier on behalf of the province and then remitted back to the province for distribution to the PSAPs in order to upgrade systems and services required to make 911 and public safety function. Ontario, unfortunately, is not one of those provinces. There is no funding here for that, so municipalities burden the cost directly for providing.
But it is provincially regulated, though, right? Like, it's not like Skewgog doesn't have to have its own 911 system and Oshawa has another one, or is that the case?
So yes. So each province has a public safety minister or ministry. But the issue is that fire, police, and EMS are governed by different ministries. So policing is done by the Solicitor General's office, fire is done by the Fire Marshal's office, and obviously health is done by the Ministry of Health. So in some cases, and in some provinces, they have amalgamated all of those centers into a subset. So like a one main 911 center and then a number of secondary agencies, they're called, which actually do the dispatch. In Ontario, you have a number of regions, designated areas. So we have several 911 centers across Ontario. And then within that are divided up into public safety.
So if I call 911, it knows sort of based on where I'm located, where to go, where to send a call.
Correct.
Okay. And is this, it's a global system, right? Like in the UK, it's 999, but every country pretty well has this now, right?
For the most part, yes. There are still pockets of the world that don't have it. And in fact, there are some areas in Canada with still don't have 911 service. Really? And in the US, there are still pockets that don't have 911 service.
So are we talking remote areas? Is that?
More, it's more in the northern areas. We also have, in Ontario, we have a couple of what are called unincorporated areas, which they have no formal governance. So they're not a municipality, they're not a town. So they don't have any organization to pull those services together.
So if I'm in one of those areas and I do have cell service and I dial 911, nothing happens?
You may, depending on how your call gets bounced. If it's cell service, you may get a response, you may not.
Interesting. The 911 operators, the whole system is analog, right? And it's being switched to digital. Correct? So I'm trying to get my head around this because I understand what digital means, but it sounds like it's a digital system now. But so what's the difference?
So right now the system is configured to deliver voice. It's all based on voice. So the system has very limited capability to deliver data into the 911 center. So right now with a 911 call, when you call, think of it like caller ID. It can pick up your name, your address, who your carrier is, whether you're a landline or a wireless call, and a couple of other facts. But these are fixed length fields of information, and it's a very small chunk of information that's delivered with it. They managed to, in the 90s, they managed to jam mobile service. So location technology then became, because before the carrier knew where you were because you had a tethered connection to the wall.
Right.
Once users became mobile and wandering around, location became an issue, and it's still an issue today.
Okay.
So there are various methods used to calculate where you are, but they are all approximate. They're not, they can be plus or minus 100 meters, which if you're in a cornfield, not such a big deal. But if you're in a 50-story apartment building downtown Toronto or a parking garage, that's a real issue.
Yet Amazon can send a drone right to my front door with no problem.
Correct.
Right? I'm going to hold you there for a sec because we're going to take a break. It's intriguing. When we come back, I want to learn more about the whole 911 and the future, as well as some other security type things that individuals can use to help them stay safe. So hold that thought. We'll be back right after these messages.
As a natural gas company, a question we get asked a lot is, what are you doing about climate change?
We're stepping up. Join us in supporting Ontario's sustainable energy future. Learn more at enbridgegas.com/environment.
Welcome back. My guest today is Holly Barkwell, a cyber security specialist. We've been learning all about 911. Holly, welcome back. I'm intrigued about 911 system being switched from analog into digital. So, because the whole world seems digital to me. So there are obviously a lot of drawbacks with the present system and it needs to be upgraded, correct? So your company, Barkwell Holland, is responsible for helping organizations or municipalities upgrade the system. Is that more or less what you're doing?
So we do two things. So I'm also the National Emergency Number Association Canadian Region Director. And so NENA is an advocacy organization for legislative, regulatory issues, education, and standards and best practices. So those apply globally. So I'm the representative for that. So that's number one thing that I do is educate municipalities, government, pretty much anybody who will listen on best practices, why public safety is so important, and why they need to support long-term sustainable funding to make the system better. The second thing I do is with Barkwell Holland Group Inc. is we help organizations manage change. So anytime an organization is struggling with service delivery or technology or training, we help them figure out what the solutions are and then how to go about implementing them. And then we help them implement as necessary as well.
So you had mentioned before that if somebody calls 911, the phone company, the powers that be, whatever, sends the phone number, the address, and the person's name to the 911 operator. But it's limited to that. So when you switch over to the new technology, will you get all the GPS data as well?
So earlier we talked about location being an issue. So location has been problematic since the introduction of mobile technology. And that's one of the first things that is going to be improved significantly with the introduction of the new technology platform. And that is because every mobile device that everyone carries now has a GPS chip in it. So that is a lot more accurate than any algorithm we can use to try and calculate position. It will also be significantly more reliable within tall structures or underground parking garages, etc. So it's going to just be better. That's going to be one of the first things that's integrated into the new system because that is key to everything else working.
So you can run, but you won't be able to hide.
That is correct.
And it's I'm assuming it's a twofold system because the operator also has to know where the emergency vehicles are, right?
That is correct.
So they would have a screen, I guess, which has all the little map stuff on it, and it shows you that fire truck A is over there, and I'm calling from here, and they'll be able to. It sounds like it would be much faster communication.
Well, these systems are very complex. There is a whole rule engine that goes inside that builds up to say, depending on where in the municipality the incident is occurring, depending on the type of incident it is, what vehicles need to go, who can get there the fastest, what skills you need on that piece of equipment, and what is the best way to route that equipment there in the least amount of time. And if somebody calls in sick that day, well, that changes everything.
Throws everything off.
So we used to call it artificial intelligence. It was not. It's just rule-based engine. But with the introduction of AI technology, some of these systems can be so intense and regimented that the data that we can collect going in, because in the past everything was based on stale data. So what happened and what can we do better based on what we know happened? Well, now we can collect data in real time. So as things shift, for example, you have an incident that escalates and you now have wind comes up and blows a plume of horrible toxic chemicals. What is our evacuation zone immediately? And we can do things like that on the fly. And so that's where you need a lot more processing power. You need the data coming in, but you also need the analytics. It's not enough to just receive the data. You have to be able to turn it into information.
You need to do something with it.
Correct. So that's part of the whole process and the upgrade.
So I shouldn't turn off my location services on my phone?
Well, you can, but in fact, some of the new regulatory requirements coming down soon will state that if you call 911, 911 overrides that. It will turn it back on temporarily to get the location so that they can help you.
I'd heard they're doing that or thinking about doing that with the Amber Alerts as well. So when is this happening, or is it already started?
It's already started. Actually, the industry in general started planning for this shift in the early 2000s.
Okay.
So this is a big forklift change for public safety, but banking and finance did it, over 20 years ago, and it's been working fine. So we know the model works.
It's interesting that the safety element, which is probably one of the most important elements of our society, is lagging so far behind.
Exactly.
That's scary.
Yep.
Is there a country that's more advanced than Canada?
Right now, no. So the CRTC enacted some legislation in 2017 to impel the carriers, because they have no authority over public safety. They only have regulatory authority over the carriers. Right. So they enacted some legislation to impel them to do certain things, which when they do it, have a trickle-down effect to the 911 centers. So things started in 2017. So with those changes, they put in some deadlines, one of which is the entire country needs to be migrated over to next generation by March of 2025.
Oh, okay.
So we are in process of that now. So the carriers just turned up. So the new digital network is going to be called the Emergency Services IP Network, or ESINet for short.
Right.
The voice portion of that network was turned up in March of this year.
Okay.
That makes us the first country in the world to operationalize an end-to-end digital service.
Wow.
And our data network is going to follow later this year. So by the end of the year.
I assume you're busy.
I am.
Yeah, no kidding. And it sounds like that you're going to be working for a while. This is not something that's going to happen overnight, right?
It takes some time, yes.
And I'm sure that by the time you have it all implemented, it'll change. The back end will have to be, and it'll be a constant upgrade, right?
So, we got used to having telephone systems that went in the back room. And the phone company would come in every 5 or 6 years, plunk in a software update, lock it up and go away, and everything would just continue working. So now phone systems are just another computer system that have to be, they need care and feeding the same as any other enterprise system. Yeah. So yes, it's a lot more work.
Good for you.
More cost to maintain. So
yeah, well, hopefully that they'll dedicate more resources to it and speed it up a bit. As far as implementation goes. But I won't say anything more about the government on that. So let's take it down to a personal level, because cybersecurity, this show is being produced by the Skugog Chamber of Commerce. So on a personal level, I'm really concerned because I'm afraid the Russians are going to hack my computer. Because I don't know why they would. I don't really have much on there that would be worth taking. So I've heard of things like VPN. I've heard of things like Tor browser. I've heard of don't connect to the internet. So what can I do to stay safe? So
first thing is do some reading. So Google, do a little bit of reading. VPNs, or virtual private networks, are a good thing. And the intent of a VPN is to keep your browsing history safe. Or private, which is what it should be. Because companies, commercialized entities, all want to track your data. They want to know how they can best serve you ads to make you buy stuff.
Right.
And that's fine. But you also have nefarious actors that want to get in there and steal your information for bad reasons. So at the end of the day, if you're going to do something online, try not to do it at Starbucks. You don't want to use public Wi-Fi because it's generally unencrypted with no security on it. And those are the places that hackers love to sit, because they can literally collect your login password credentials.
How does that work? I'm sitting at Starbucks, I've got my laptop, I'm doing my online banking, right? The link is between me and the bank. So how does somebody else tap into that?
So when you're on Wi-Fi or public Wi-Fi, you are transmitting to a router point located at the premises or somewhere close by.
Yep.
Well, this is all done by radio waves. So somebody that wants to collect that information just needs a radio transmitter and receiver, and they just listen for the traffic and they pick off the pieces that look interesting to them.
And when you say they listen, this is digital, right?
Yes.
They don't,
Yeah, so it's just they would see it. They would have a collection package of software on their computer that just gobbles that stuff up, and they can walk in, they can put a device down, hide it under a chair, and let it sit there for weeks. Don't, it doesn't have to be monitored. Nobody would ever know. So if you're going to do banking on your phone, use your cell provider's network because it's secure.
Okay, so if I'm doing it here, for example, if I use my cell phone here to do an e-transfer to somebody,
Right.
that would be between myself and my cell phone people, right?
Correct.
Like there's no
in between there.
unless I use the Wi-Fi in the building.
Correct.
Which I do.
So if it's a secured environment, it's marginally better.
Right.
But I say if you didn't install it yourself and you don't know what's in it,
Right.
then you don't know what's in it.
So the Wi-Fi, the router in my house is pretty secure,
Right.
unless somebody sits in my driveway all the time.
Right.
Right, okay.
Now, also depending on how you set it up. So if you take the default settings when you plug it in out of the box and you
Right.
don't change your administrative login and password, well, most hackers know that information. So they will log in and have at your home
right,
system. So
right.
you need to take precautions. The other point of vulnerability is we all have smart homes now. So we have Google, we have Alexa in our lives, which is sending stuff out to the cloud all the time.
Right.
But those devices have minimum security set up specifically so that they can connect because we want instant on.
Right.
So those systems are much easier to compromise than, say, your wired computer to the wall.
Can they get into my my banking password through Google Home?
Potentially. If you leave it logged in and they manage to hack your network, then yes.
You're not making me feel very secure here. So okay. So essentially, I should have VPN running all the time, right?
Yes. It's
or at least when I'm doing stuff that it would be of interest to someone else. That's interesting. And then there's are there other ways like Google, for example? I save my passwords with Google because it says save this password. I figure, well, Google's a big company; they must know what they're doing.
Yes. So they are all cloud-based. Google and Amazon. They all have lots of resources to put towards security, but they are not invulnerable.
Right.
But for the most part, you want the streamlined user experience. So saving your passwords in Google are fairly secure, but when you're done with a site, log out, close your browser, particularly if you're using a public computer.
Okay.
Make sure you don't leave anything around. If you can, shut off the computer.
So the key is to log out.
Yes.
Don't just close your browser.
Correct.
Okay.
Log out, close everything down, and if you're able to, erase the cache because then everything's...
All right. I have to stop you there because we're out of time, which is unfortunate because I could go on about this forever. I'm intrigued. I'm nervous now. I'm really nervous. I'm going to turn my phone off as soon as I'm out of here, and I'm never going to hook my computer up to the internet again. But listen, Holly, thank you so much for sharing this information. We'll put your website on the screen so that people, if they do have more questions or comments, they can certainly contact you direct. And thanks for your time and joining us today. Appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed it.
I'd also like to thank Enbridge Gas for sponsoring this speaker series and for allowing us to learn about various organizations and individuals in our community. I'm Jonathan Van Bilsen. On behalf of the Scugog Chamber of Commerce, I'd like to thank you all for watching. Please join us every month right here on Rogers TV.